death toll from this morning's bus crash on the R33 road between Vryheid and Port Petersburg in northern KwaZulu-Natal has risen to 9. President Cyril Ramaphosa arrives in Windhoek, Namibia to attend the funeral of former Namibian President Hage Geingob. Unemployed health workers are set to march on the union buildings tomorrow, calling on government to, as they say, save our healthcare system. A very good afternoon. We're coming to you live from our studios here in Auckland Park, Johannesburg. Thank you very much for tuning in. You're watching The Week Ahead. You can interact with us on social media platforms. It's at Week Ahead, and our hashtag is The Week Ahead. I'm your host, Mfundo Mabala. Now, leading our bulletin this hour, the death toll from this morning's bus crash on the R33 road between Vryheid and Port Petersburg in northern KwaZulu-Natal has risen to 9. In a statement, the ANC has confirmed that members were returning home from its election manifesto launch at Durban's Moses Mabhida Stadium that was held yesterday. For more, we bring in our reporter Mlondi Khadebe. Mlondi, good afternoon. Very, very disturbing news of the passing of 9 people. Now, just talk us through this particular incident.
Thank you very much, Mfundo. We're here outside the Moses Mabhida Stadium where the ANC was gathering yesterday for the manifesto. But sadly, this morning we received the news that the bus crashed in Port Petersburg where at least 9 people died and more than 50 people were taken to hospital. But I'll speak to the ANC spokesperson, Umamalapa Upengo. Thank you very much, ma'am, for your time. Briefly about the incident this morning where the members of the ANC were coming from the manifesto launch.
The ANC is saddened and it's received with profound shock the news of the passing of our comrades who were coming from this very historic Maihlome rally, which was reminiscent of the Maihlome rally of 1994. Given the weight that our members in this province and all over the country gave and lended to this rally. We're very sad that on their way back home in Mpumalanga, these are comrades from the Chief Albert Luthuli sub-region and perished on the road. They were in a bus. We have been informed that at least 9 of them are concerned. We are have been confirmed dead. And of course, as you say, others in critical condition. But we are very loath to speak about the figures at this point because we do need to get the exact accurate details. We will get these details in the course of the day from the delegation of the ANC from this province of ours, led by Comrade Unomagugu Smelani, our deputy chairperson in the province, and also led from Mpumalanga by Comrade Shirwa, the provincial secretary of Mpumalanga. So both those teams, Lauma Timbumabili, they are by now on site, I would imagine, and they're helping with establishing a full set of facts. But we do want to say to members of the ANC, condolences. More importantly, we want to say to the communities where they came from, to the families, more importantly, immediate families, extended families, their loved ones, their friends, and their closest comrades, that siyabonga that they passed on in the line of duty with their boots on, and justice to them. We are going to intensify our campaign to make sure that the African National Congress wins this election. That's the only way we can really honor those comrades who have fallen.
Can you just give us more details of the accident? Is there any preliminary report that the ANC have received in relation to how this incident happened?
I am very loath to do so. It's very important to speak on the basis of full set of facts. But the bus either collapsed or capsized, and those are some of the things that people such as Comrade Nomagugu are going to be receiving reports on, so that we can give you a comprehensive statement. We did issue a very terse statement that was just alerting the nation to this development. But we also want to say that our comrades who have fallen would not want their passing to water down what they came here for. They would want us to move forward. They would want us to honor them by making sure that the key messages contained in the elections manifesto is communicated, and that is what we are going to do in honor of them. During the course of the week, we will outline a number of plans to honor them, including when the president returns from Namibia, where he is attending the funeral of a president who was also his dear friend. When that happens, I know that the president will make known what as the face of the campaign of the ANC, how he feels on behalf of the leadership of the ANC about what has occurred. And he would also urge members of the ANC, and I do want on behalf of the organization to urge members of the ANC and supporters of the ANC who are gathered here today, and those that we were feeding through more than 100 community radio stations across the country were participating in Maihlome from wherever they were in South Africa. We do urge them not to drop the ball and not to lose focus, to honor these comrades by taking the manifesto of the ANC and explain it to our people on the ground.
Is the ANC happy about the behavior of the supporters yesterday at the Moses Mabhida?
Absolutely happy, unless you notice something that I did not notice. Our supporters were unbelievable. They were enthused, they were vibrant, the ANC came alive, the ANC showed its full might. In fact, the ANC surpassed, our ground forces surpassed the expectations of the leadership in terms of how they rose, also to defend their movement against all manner of public narratives that suggest that we don't have presence in this province. The ANC is loved in this province. We saw the mini rallies that were staged in various regions in the province, massively supported. So we had no doubt that we were going to not just fill Mabhida Stadium, because we are not really about stadiumology. It's always about whether we've reconnected with our people. This place was a groundswell, including outside here in the park, was a groundswell. People could not even fill up the stadium. The stadium was already filled. They couldn't enter the stadium. This entire area, we haven't seen an overflow of that kind in many of our rallies since 1994. Kings Park was a hive of activity. So we are absolutely comfortable that where we are on the ground with our people, the public negative narrative, we test it by connecting with our people, and we started reconnecting with our people on second when we went into the manifesto review exercise. And of course, through various imbizos we've been doing over the past electoral year, electoral season, the 5 years. But we intentionally went to the people of South Africa via what we called the manifesto review, which we launched on the 2nd of September in Dobsonville, Soweto, where we said we want to account for the commitments, the 19 commitments that we had made in 27 commitments we had made in 2019. And we went across the country after the national one. We came to KZN. We went to the various regions in KZN. We went to various VDs wall to wall across the country. And we were basically saying where there have been missteps. We are the only organization that has got the capacity to say we have erred. And I think you heard that also from the core message and the core narrative of the president on behalf of the organization.
Today we see that the ANC members are still here trying to clean up the Mabhida.
Yes, it's a civic responsibility. We can't, in our manifesto, talk about habitable spaces, habitable communities. We can't speak about spatial transformation, places where our people live with dignity and lending dignity to our people. We found Moses Mabhida prim and proper. We need to leave it prim and proper. We are the only organization that has done something like that. Many rallies have been held here. It's only the ANC that, after a massive rally, to get led by the Deputy Secretary General and a number of our National Executive Committee members and our volunteers are cleaning up Moses Mabhida all the way throughout the day.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for your time.
Thank you very much.
That was Mahlengi Bengu, the spokesperson of the ANC, briefing us in relation to what happened this morning, especially about the accident, also the behavior of the ANC supporters during the manifesto rally. Back to you in studio, Mfundo.
Out in KZN for us, we shift our focus to this story now. Unemployed health workers are set to march on the union buildings on Monday, the 26th of February, calling on government to, as they say, save our healthcare system. In response to this week's budget announcement, the South African Medical Association says it hopes enough funds will be put towards dealing with the shortage of doctors in hospitals. This also includes the plight faced by medical practitioners, where salaries have been eroded by inflation over the years. We're now joined by Dr. Jose Letlape from the Africa Harm Reduction Alliance and former president of the Health Professions Council of South Africa. Dr. Letlape, good afternoon, and thank you very much for your time, rather.
Good afternoon to you and the viewers, and thank you for the invitation.
No, it's a pleasure to have you with us. So the plight... Apologies for that. So the plight of unemployed doctors has dominated headlines for the past 2 months now. But many health professionals felt the health minister in his initial press conference around 3 weeks ago had stated the obvious, that all of you as doctors know there are unemployed doctors, but what you were really looking for was for government to now start providing solutions. But before we get to the possible solutions, we'd like to know what we can attribute this crisis to, honestly.
We can attribute this crisis to poor planning and inappropriate utilization of resources. With the funds that we have in healthcare, we should be doing better. But the way we run our healthcare system is not to prioritize the areas of priority, which are frontline healthcare workers. Every hospital that gets accredited with a certain number of beds needs a certain staff complement. And it becomes an ethical responsibility to ensure that they have the adequate staff members to properly operate that hospital. And that is not being done. We are also spending money in areas we should not be spending on. Administration is bloated, but the frontline staff is denuded. We are not managing the system properly. We also not having dedicated funding for human resources. What needs to be done is every hospital has to come up with a human resource plan that should be properly and fully funded. We've had lots of unfilled posts. We've had a chronic problem for many years, where the biggest problem in our health system is lack of absorption capacity. We have lots of posts that are frozen, that are not funded, and we wait when we have a crisis and people are prepared, want to stay here, and now are prepared to march. Then suddenly you can find some money in treasury to relieve the problem. But those are temporary relief.
I actually want us to tackle the funds and whether they would be adequate enough. But before that, just on the statement that you make around improper planning, does that then mean you agree with those that say, if we're looking at the high medical negligence claims that the government has been seeing in the health ministry, that perhaps it's as a result of this improper planning, where they decided to fund certain posts that were not as important as the frontline staff you speak of?
Yes, that will be a key part of the problem. But that issue of negligence also goes to the issue of not having proper equipment, not having proper complement of staff, not having enough consumables and drugs. If I'm going to be on call and I'm working 3 straight days without relief, I'm a disaster to society. I'm going to be creating hazards, not only to the patients, but also to myself. So the issue of sufficient staff complement, adequately resourced facilities that have the proper equipment, that have running water, that have electricity all the time, it's critical. All these issues need to be addressed for us to have a functional healthcare system.
But it seems government fails to appreciate that what came first was the improper planning, because to a certain extent it sounded as though they wanted to blame the budget constraints on the high negligence claims that they're getting, that this is at the heart of the problem to a certain extent. So it becomes a whole concept of what comes first, the chicken or the egg in this instance.
Well, it's a multitude of factors. But one of the key drivers of the situation not improving is that those of us who run it don't have to use it for our own healthcare. If you really want healthcare to work, the president must go to where the voters go. Then suddenly things will improve. But when we have persistent apartheid in health, we go to a different place. And worse still, even some of us who work in these institutions, we have medical aid. When we're sick, we don't use our own institutions. We run to the private sector. So all these issues of inequity, all these issues of inequality all this issue of no solidarity contribute to the problems that we have. If we pool all the resources that we have and we may help build a system that is for all of us, we don't have this notion where the public sector is for the poor, where the public sector is for where I want to go. We professionalize the healthcare system. When you professionalize the healthcare system, that means you pay people decent professional salaries so that they don't have to worry about anything. There are other issues that you might not be aware of, where professionals have been inadequately compensated. They've had to do overtime. Now that overtime is being taken away. So we're robbing Peter to pay Paul. So what we see is they're now going to stop paying overtime so that they could have money to employ doctors. This is rearranging chairs on the Titanic. We need an overhaul of the system. We need empowered institutions. We need accountability from those that run these institutions.
So meaning where some have praised government, saying Treasury has made good on its promise to find money for the health ministry, you're saying in real terms this won't assist much?
This is Band-Aid. Just remember, during COVID, lots of people came in. Lots of money was made available. After COVID, they were let go. They could not be absorbed into the system. So let us not be fooled by these temporary measures. Treasury is responding to doctors who marched to KZN in Maritzburg. There'll be a response now because healthcare workers are marching to the union buildings. We can't run a country where we are mismanaging it. And for cosmetics, when people protest, we come up with emergency measures that are not long-lasting. I asked the deputy minister at one of the breakfasts post the budgets, where's the human resource plan? What are you funding? Are you funding it on a recurring, sustainable basis? We need healthcare professionals, not just today for electioneering. We need them tomorrow. We need them into the future.
Now, Doctor, given the challenges that you've just highlighted, what does this mean, honestly, for government's readiness to implement the NHI?
I think, we should begin to think about these issues. We're just talking now about a crisis of human resources and employment of doctors. The NHI that is being proposed, has anybody explained to us how it would alleviate this problem? Has anybody told us how it's going to alleviate the state of the buildings, the infrastructure, lack of equipment? Nobody talks about that. Everybody has this impression that, we're going to be contracting with healthcare professionals, we're going to be paying for services. Where are the people to provide the services? How is it going to help our embattled public healthcare system? What is being proposed with NHI? It's like going to a mechanic who tells you got engine problems with your car, and you decide you're going to buy a new set of tires. You are not addressing the problem, and that car is going nowhere. So we are not addressing the issues of human resources, the issues of infrastructure, the issues of equipment, the issues of vicarious litigation, the issues of no drugs in our facilities. We are not addressing those issues. The issues of no transport for patients, no follow-up. We're not addressing those issues.
So it means, Sama, apologies for interjecting there, Doctor. So it means the South African Medical Association was not being malicious when it decided to make it known that it would challenge government if it proceeded with the NHI currently because they're absolutely not ready.
Well, for me, I don't have the resources to challenge government, but I want to call them out on what they call NHI. I'm one of the people that has advocated for NHI. What is being advocated for is to create a third tier in our healthcare system. NHI means we synchronize, we create solidarity amongst all citizens. We have one health system. You can get your care from private or public, but we pool the resources, we band together to make a system that works for all of us. This is creating a third tier, whilst those that come up with the system will still be hanging on to their parliamentary medical aid. That is not NHI. Everybody has asked, what's going to happen to my medical aid? Everybody will take it to a section that says nothing. You cannot come up with another funding mechanism when you have a funding mechanism from Parliament called Medical Schemes Act.
But Doctor, they've told us that we'll all basically medical aids will only provide specific services. We're not yet sure what exactly those services are, but our understanding is that everybody will now be contributing to the NHI fund.
But we are being turned into dummies. That Medical Schemes Act is an act of parliament. If it is only going to be doing certain things, why are you not reforming it to incorporate this NHI into that, where you are reforming the Medical Schemes Act? And as you come up with a scheme that goes out there, it replaces the Medical Schemes Act. Otherwise, you're going to have two acts of parliament. Whatever you say does not wish away the fact that it's an act of parliament, and those that are privileged will say, I have a right. That act is not withdrawn, and I want to contribute to this side.
As they've
not
already
to this
stated.
Side that's going to be run by the Minister of Health and his cronies.
As some have already
control.
stated, Doctor, because even you've got medical aid schemes that are already challenging this particular bill and also cite that this would infringe on ordinary citizens' right to choose.
But the point is that we are having an incompetent parliament. The Medical Schemes Act is an act of parliament for financing healthcare for a sector of the population. NHI, as proposed, is going to be for those that are employed that are not on medicality being taxed. It's coming from the same parliament. Why can't they get their ducks in a row and understand that the responsibility is to all South Africans, not to create new nest eggs to eat from? This doesn't make sense. It defies logic. And if any one of us thinks what is being proposed is a reform, no, what is being proposed is a new fund to eat from.
Doctor, thank you very much for your insights this afternoon. That's Dr. Jose Letlapa from the African Harm Reduction Association and former president of the Health Professions Council of South Africa. To this story now, the Democratic Alliance's premier candidate in KwaZulu-Natal, Chris Pappas, says his party has solutions for the service delivery challenges in the province. Addressing a media breakfast ahead of the State of the Province address this coming week, he says his party will aim to start with getting basic services to work, such as water and electricity. Pappas announced the DA's top 10 priorities if they were to come into power in the province.
The DA has repeatedly made it clear that it aims to unseat the ANC government in the upcoming general elections in May. But to achieve this, the party admits that it might require co-governing the province with the IFP or be part of a multi-party charter coalition. Chris Pappas is the mayor of the first DA-led municipality in the province, the Umgeni local municipality in Howick, and he believes he can rescue the province from all service delivery issues. He says water cuts and power outages in his government will be a thing of the past. His party will reach out to experts and the private sector to help fix problems.
Our province is full of people who want to contribute towards accountability but also rebuilding. In Umgeni, we've established civilian oversight committees and civilian technical expertise who help government free of charge without an interest in the procurement process to share with us the knowledge to rebuild our municipality, and the same thing will be done here in the province of KwaZulu-Natal.
Pappas also added that they will cut bloated boards of state entities to make money available for service delivery. And he says they will hold civil servants accountable.
The fourth is skills and lifestyle audits. We know that people are enjoying themselves off of public benefit, and this has to change. And I'm sure once we announce the lifestyle and skills audit, like we saw in Umgeni, a number of people will conveniently leave because they know what's next. Just by the way, 8 senior managers have left Umgeni because of consequence management and skills-related issues.
The party says its weekly poll shows that the ANC would get less than 30% of the vote in the province.
Will we work with the EFF? No. We're clear on that. Will we work with the ANC? Not in its current form, no. But things change. This election is going to be very interesting. In fact, if you look at the polling now, you might go into a situation where you have to form a minority government in the province of KwaZulu-Natal. That means you don't have an outright majority. But that is not going to address the challenges that we face in the province.
To get its message across, the party also launched a print and digital billboard advertising campaign. Lundi Khatebe, SABC News, Durban.
On the 19th of February, the International Court of Justice began hearings into the legality of Israel's occupation of Palestinian territories since 1967. The hearings, which span over a course of 6 decades, predate Israel's ongoing bombardment of Gaza, but have become a focal point early in the proceedings. These are as a result of a 2022 resolution by the UN General Assembly that called on the ICJ to offer an advisory or non-binding opinion on the occupation. The hearings will close on the 26th of February. Israel chose not to participate. For more, we're now joined by Professor Henny Stradom, who's an international law expert. Professor, good afternoon and thank you for your time.
Yeah, good afternoon to the viewers.
No, it's a pleasure to have you with us. So before we get into expectation for tomorrow's submissions, can you just share your views on the past week's submissions, starting with China, which most certainly caught the attention of many with their unambiguous statement that Palestine has a right to engage in an armed struggle?
Well, that whole argument deals with the right to self-determination, and it has a long history in international law. In the 60s and 70s, there were quite a number of liberation movements acting under the right to self-determination. And there are some General Assembly resolutions to the effect that a self-determination struggle may resort to any kind of measure, depending on the circumstances, sort of stating it in a broad way, which may include the use of force. So, and I think that has been applied to the position of the Palestinians as well, and their right to self-determination. That is one of the main issues concerning this conflict between Israel and Palestine for many, many decades now. And certainly, we can expect arguments of that kind to be submitted to the court. But that does not take away from the real issues here. And that is why we have to concentrate on the General Assembly's request for an advisory opinion, because they set out the limits of the course or the framework within which the court has to decide on its advisory opinion.
But then now, if we confine ourselves to that particular advisory opinion, China also spoke on the jurisdiction matter, which featured quite prominently, where others such as the US held the view that the ICJ should not render an advisory opinion because it would scupper negotiation talks currently underway. Your views on that? Because China felt that that can still continue. There can be some sort of a negotiated settlement, but what is happening in the court now must continue.
China is perfectly correct in that. And there's quite often you find states making the argument that the court doesn't have jurisdiction to announce on a matter of this kind because it must be settled politically. And we can expect the United States to make that argument again. It has done so in the case of the Nicaragua case in 1986. So I do not, it's not a surprise that the US will come up with that argument. Now, whatever the political trajectory is at the moment and the aims of that is something completely separate from what the court has to decide. The court has its own function. And once there is an application for an advisory opinion, it has to focus on that and not get involved in political settlements of whatever kind they may be on the agenda at this point in time.
Some pundits actually went as far as saying it was quite arrogant of the United States to say, hold on, don't allow your proceedings to continue because us and Israel have some sort of a negotiation that is currently underway. You'll scupper all of that.
Yeah, I also think it's arrogant. The question is also, why hasn't it been done before? I mean, the aims at a political settlement has been going on for a long time now, since 1967, with no results. And what is at stake in this advisory opinion is also the failure of the international community to settle that conflict and to settle it once and for all. So that is an alarming sort of development for many decades now. And it is now important that the court has this sort of broadly framed request for an advisory opinion. And I think it's very important that the court, will sort of render its opinion fairly soon. We expect it, I think, before the end of the year.
Now, these particular submissions, or what is happening or happened, started last week, predates the current bombardment, as we stated in our intro. But how much of the current conflict will contribute to some of those submissions that are now put before the ICJ?
Yeah, there may be aspects of it that still become relevant for the court to take into account. I have to add that the legal principles concerning the occupation and the policies that Israel applied in the occupied territories have been on the sort of agenda for a long time. And I think the law is fairly settled as that is far as concerned, especially from the United Nations understanding of the occupation and also the many sort of reports by special rapporteurs about the conflict over many years have made that clear, that this is a potentially an unlawful occupation. So it is now for the court. The court has now the opportunity to decide on that. And certainly it will take the existing position into account, coming from a long, long way. And in that context, what is currently happening may be of relevance too.
And again, China put that succinctly as well, stating that for more than 50 years, Israel has occupied Palestinian territory. And just because it's been in excess of 50 years doesn't make it less illegal. It remains illegal, and they would need to move, because they went on to even state that the principle of right to self-determination cannot necessarily be used when you occupy another's territory. It is the people of Palestine, according to China, that can use that principle and say they have and must affirm their right to self-determination, but not a situation where Israel itself continues to use the same concept of self-determination when they occupy territory belonging to Palestine. What did you make of just that statement there, or the desire to make that distinction that you cannot both use this particular concept of right to self-determination on this territory in question?
Yeah, that's also correct. I mean, you cannot exercise your own right to self-determination to that extent. And what we also have to take into account, that this has been confirmed a long time ago and many times over, that the Palestinians have a right to self-determination. And I think it's on that basis that the two-state solution won support in the international community now for a long time. But as the United States has pointed out, the current conflict has made that something that seems to be almost unreachable. And I think that also, raises issues about how the self-determination will or can be exercised. But I mean, it is quite correct, the approach that was followed by China.
And then on to the AU, they're making their submissions tomorrow. And for the most part, we know the body's views around the conflict. At its recent summit, it condemned Israel's actions in Gaza. But one wonders if this week's submissions will follow the same tone as the one of the summit. Your views on that?
I think it will be, because, many of the submissions operate with the understanding that much of the legal principles have been settled all along. So there's no much sort of new law that they have to use in order to come to a conclusion on the occupation, the nature of it, the racial discriminatory policies applied in the occupied territories, and as well what could be the consequences of this for the rest of the international community and for the United Nations. So the legal framework, the international legal framework on that is fairly clear. It is now for the court to apply this to the current, or in the context of the current request for an advisory opinion, and come to clarity, because that is what the advisory opinion is about, is to provide clarity on a situation where there might not be a clarity concerning the legal position.
Professor, thank you very much for your insights this afternoon. That's Professor Henny Strydom. He's an international law expert. More news on the other side of this break. Do stay with us. Welcome back. Thank you very much for staying with us. Now, another round of high-level talks between the US, Qatar, Egypt and Israel over a possible deal to release the hostages being held by Hamas in Gaza has been taking place in Paris this weekend. The issue of a lasting ceasefire and the possible offensive by Israel into the southern Gaza city of Rafah will also be discussed. Ross Cullen reports.
The United States, Egypt, Qatar and Israel all present here in Paris this weekend for talks to try to make progress on the release of the hostages and an eventual end to the conflict in Gaza. The head of the CIA, Bill Burns, will be among the US delegation, and also the head of the Israeli intelligence agency, Mossad, will be here to try to move forward about the flow of aid into Gaza, a possible ceasefire deal and the release of the hostages. Hamas is believed to still be holding around 100 hostages in Gaza who were kidnapped from inside Israel in October during the group's attack. There have been talks in recent days in Egypt between delegations from Hamas and also political leaders in Cairo. We know that the head of the Palestinian militant group, Ismail Haniyeh, was there in the Egyptian capital for talks with the head of the Egyptian intelligence agency. Now, Qatar also involved. The Prime Minister will be leading the delegation from the Gulf state, and his defence minister was here in Paris on Thursday for talks with his French counterpart. Now, there have been negotiations here in Paris before in January, but they broke up without an agreement. There are, though, hopes on all sides that there could be a chance this weekend to find common ground on an eventual end to the conflict and, of course, a possible deal to release the hostages. Ross Cullen, SABC News, Paris.
The war in Ukraine remains an open wound at the heart of Europe. So says the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, who was speaking in a ministerial meeting of the Security Council marking the 2-year anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine's mainland in violation of both the UN Charter and international law. The event also marked 10 years since Russia's attempted illegal annexation of Ukraine's autonomous Republic of Crimea and the city of Sevastopol. Guterres reminded the meeting that the UN is based on the principle of sovereign equality of all its member states and that international disputes must be settled by peaceful means.
Guterres pointed to the founding document of the United Nations, its charter, in which tools to settle grievances can be found, including mediation, judicial settlement or arbitration, among others, as he pointed to Africa as an example.
We must pay tribute to the wisdom of African leaders and follow their example. Colonial powers, including my own country, divided the continent of Africa with the stroke of a pen, as they did in other parts of the world. But post-independence leaders understood that trying to change borders would open a Pandora's box of bloodshed and feed even greater grievances. In my experience, it's extremely difficult for people to agree on the past. What is more important and less difficult is to help them agree on the future. And to agree on the future, international law and the principles set out in the UN Charter, including respect for territorial integrity and the political independence of states, are fundamental. This is why the Russian invasion of Ukraine is such a dangerous precedent.
He told the Council that Ukrainians are suffering appallingly from the war inflicted upon them, with estimates that over 10,000 civilians have been killed, although that figure is likely much higher. Among soldiers killed or injured on both sides, hundreds of thousands. While he pointed to an independent international commission of inquiry on Ukraine that reported civilians and prisoners tortured and more than 200 cases of sexual violence, mostly at the hands of Russian forces.
Attacks against humanitarians and civilian infrastructure must stop.
Guterres called for all perpetrators to be held to account.
Many Ukrainians are experiencing the living nightmare of losing their children. All children that have been deported must be reunited with their families. Nearly 4 million Ukrainians have been internally displaced, including almost 1 million children. And over 14.5 million people inside the country need humanitarian assistance. Humanitarian aid programs carried out by the United Nations and our partners, particularly our Ukrainian partners, reached 11 million people last year. That included providing life-saving food, water, healthcare and shelter, as well as working to remove the deadly explosives that litter the Ukrainian landscape.
He further conceded that the war was also harming the Russian population, with thousands of young Russians killed at the front, while civilians affected by Ukrainian strikes on Russian cities were also suffering.
The danger of the conflict escalating and expanding is very real, and around the world, the war is deepening geopolitical divides. It is fanning regional instability and shrinking the space available to address other urgent global issues, and it is undermining the shared norms and values that make us all safer. The conflict accelerated a surge in food prices, economic shocks, and a global cost of living crisis, hitting developing countries still recovering from COVID-19 the hardest. In addition, the prospect of this war resulting in nuclear accident chills spines around the world. Both sides to the conflict must take all possible measures to prevent that from happening at all nuclear sites across the country.
The UN chief told the meeting that disregarding the UN Charter was at the root of the problem, and that by again respecting it was where solutions were to be found. Sherman Brycebees, SABC News, New York.
The new Namibian president, Nangola Mbumba, says the government of Namibia will continue the work done by the late president, Hage Geingob. Addressing mourners at the funeral service of Geingob in Windhoek, Mbumba said it was important for Namibia to attain economic freedom. Dignitaries from different countries attended the service to pay their last respects to Geingob. He was described as a dedicated leader who had worked hard for the transformation of Namibia. And while Namibians ponder on the future, the new president is expected to finish the task that Geingob had started ahead of the elections later this year.
In our governance, we will continue to uphold the Constitution of the land as the supreme law. We will strive to be transparent, accountable, and inclusive. Yes, we will continue to pursue the second struggle for economic freedom of Namibians with the required urgency, efficiency, and effectiveness until shared prosperity and social justice are achieved for our citizens.
West African leaders have agreed to ease sanctions on Niger following a July coup that deposed elected President Mohamed Bazoum. They have also called for the immediate release of President Bazoum, who has been detained since the military takeover. The decision was reached after an extraordinary summit of ECOWAS heads of state in Nigeria's capital, Abuja.
The West African leaders met to discuss the decision by Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger to withdraw from ECOWAS. The three countries, which all recently underwent coups, accused the regional bloc of imposing what they call illegal and inhumane sanctions and for being influenced by foreign powers. The chairman of ECOWAS and Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu said the three countries should reconsider their decision to leave. He said ECOWAS should consider a change of strategy as it seeks to persuade Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger to restore democracy and remain in the organization. ECOWAS says their withdrawal could impact on the immigration status of their citizens, disrupt projects and programs in the region worth $500 million, and affect jobs of more than 100 ECOWAS staff from these countries. Addressing journalists after a closed-door meeting, President of the ECOWAS Commission said that the organization had resolved to lift economic and financial sanctions on Niger with immediate effect. These include the reopening of land borders to allow trade, unfreezing of assets, allowing flights to and from the country. He noted that these sanctions were lifted based on humanitarian considerations and said political sanctions are still in place. ECOWAS has also called on the military leaders of Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger to come up with an acceptable transition timetable. Meanwhile, the leaders called on all key players in Senegal to give priority to dialogue for free, fair and credible elections. Senegal's President Macky Sall says he will step down at the end of his tenure in April, and it's unclear if a new president could be elected before then. He's expected to hold talks next week with political leaders. Ajak Mangut, SABC News, Abuja.
Welcome back. Thank you very much for staying with us. Now, Pediatric Care Africa is hosting its 5th annual Ride for a Child. The event is aimed at raising funds to support underprivileged children who need surgery and medical treatment. The organization was also attempting to break the Guinness World Record for the most motorcycles riding in a staggered formation, aiming for more than 4,500 bikes.
Thousands of bikers coming together for a good cause, all in support of pediatric care for children in need. Locals also attended the event for a fun-filled day.
Right, this is a fundraising event, so we do ask people to give 100 rand to participate in the event, and that is used to pay for children's surgeries and also children's medical care that actually cannot afford or do not have access to medical care. Pediatric Care Africa is now 7 years old. This is our 5th Ride for a Child, and we hope to raise here today where we're standing R500,000 rand.
Various local stakeholders joined forces to make the event a success.
The moment you start speaking charity, and when you start speaking children and charity, bikers just manage to come together. This is absolutely amazing. You probably see there's a little tear in my eye and so on, because these are tears of joy. I haven't slept much over the last 2 weeks because of various things just happening, and it just happens, and we just put it together, and this is what we put together.
The bikers rode 350 kilometers, enjoying the camaraderie and the pleasure of making a difference.
That was great. The people that came from all over the country, it was great. It's done for a good cause. The kids, they are the future, and we must invest in the future, and we must look after them.
I think it's a wonderful cause. It's really going to be fantastic to be able to help all the people that are in need of the assistance. And it was so exciting. I can't believe there were so many motorbikes. It was like, earth-shattering.
The organizers are awaiting confirmation of the new world record. And in the meantime, the riders for Pediatric Care Africa will ride back to Mpumalanga, where their journey began. Nandi Pablaki, SABC News, Jeffreys Bay.
To this story now, so many content creators are resorting to social media sites such as TikTok to create their own reality shows. They don't depend on the traditional media space anymore, and this means more competition for TV. But there's still a huge challenge in terms of protecting their intellectual property, because unlike television, many of the content producers do not consider copyright protection. Our reporter Kagliso Popile and video journalist Silo Magoba tell the story through the experiences of David Ngoana's family in Rustenburg, who has let us into his home through videos on TikTok and Facebook. His family has videos uploaded in these platforms, and they get lots of views.
You, my father, as a couple, my father and him, I can see like not all women love men because of their looks. Maybe it's
a unique approach to share their daily experiences with the world. With the growing dominance of social media over traditional television, the family has noticed a shift in how people consume content. This inspired them to create their own family show on social media.
What have inspired you mostly to start something different, something that has never been done? You know, we are used to the traditional way of reality show, which is TV. Why social media and not maybe TV? I think maybe you got many offers, but why are you still stick to social media?
Wow, we're talking about something powerful. Social media is very powerful. Like I said to you, 99% of many people's life, we are on our phones, we are on social media. But to cut the long story short, there was a vacuum to this thing of rekindling the culture of family. What we see on social media, and many people tend to think that social media is all about bringing best stuff. But with me, I looked and I said to myself, everybody wants to trend. And people, when they want to trend, they are bringing best stuff on social media, thinking that a negative publicity is going to sell. But you can still trend You can still still be followed by bringing something positive. And I thought there was a vacuum of something positive that people lack.
Nkwane says people should focus on creating content with things that will benefit them in the long run.
We know in TV you can make money through advertisements and all those. How do you make money through your reality social media?
We need to come up with something that can make, because at the end of the day, you need to live as a person. Then, just like television, sell them something. Then it's what we doing. So many young guys on social media, they've got so many big following. But at the end of the day, it's all about the likes. It's all about, I want to trend. But they need to monetize their social media pages.
The children say they love sharing their family experiences on social media.
Showcasing my family on social media, I think it also contributes to other people, to show people how should parents teach their children and kids how to live, how to behave, how to treat others and respect and the family values as a whole.
My parents make sure they manage my education and me being on social media. So I'm not on social media all the time.
I've been doing it, I don't know for how many years. Yeah, since forever.
For them, it is also about creating lasting memories.
For me, it's creating memories with my kids and my husband. We live for a moment. But for me personally, I lost my mom, Kilumunyane, too much, but I live with those memories. But for me now, I know that they will carry this for the rest of their life. So I know that we are not here to stay forever, but these memories, they will make them stand forever.
You are giving me the leftovers of your chocolate. It's a joke. It's like that. It's like... It's a joke.
This means social media continues to pose a threat to traditional media.
There's a significant shift in advertising revenue towards investors now and companies. They are now more interested in putting their investment in social media and towards influencers, because the influencers are offering content that is targeted towards a particular set of people, a particular group of people. So as a result, you would find that the investors, the people who are willing to pay their money, they are reducing the money that they put in traditional media.
Moringa says there should be more innovation in traditional media, more interaction and engagement, so it remains relevant. Kagiso Kipopele, SABC News.
And that's where we leave it for today. We're back again next weekend. Enjoy your afternoon further.